Everybody, welcome to our virtual Bible study, this time for Wednesday, March the 24th. We are zipping through 2021. Can't believe it, but I told you before, I'm ready for some spring weather. So the closer we get to the end of March and the closer we get to April, I think the closer we are to warmer weather. I'm excited about that. I'm ready for I know spring is kind of rainy, but I'm still ready for some warmer weather, and I'm sure you might be as well. Hey, thanks for tuning in tonight. Before we get started, can I ask you to do a favor for us here at North Hamilton? If you are on our YouTube channel tonight, would you please, first of all, give us a thumbs up. That's right below the video. Should be right somewhere. Just scroll down and right below the video, give us a thumbs up. And secondarily, subscribe to our channel. I've explained before, we're not monetized. We don't make any money off of your subscription to our channel, but the more subscribers you have on YouTube, the better features you get, advertising, publishing features. And so if you'll do that, the more subscribers we gain, the better quality video we can put out. And the more prominent the video becomes on YouTube. That's what we're after, just getting truth to people. And if you would do that, you'd help us out a great deal. So please subscribe. Subscription is free, by the way. All you have to do is sign up you have to have your name and email address. And what that does for you, personally, it's a benefit to you. When we add a new video, especially if we go live with a video, it notifies you that we have a new video or that we have a live video for your viewing. So you benefit, and so do we. And if you want, and we would encourage you to take the extra step, there is a share button. If you're on our YouTube channel, you're welcome to share this video, and it'll give you the option of doing it via message. It also allows you to share it on your Facebook channel. So please, if you'll do that. Now, if you are on Facebook, it's much easier to share, I think, on Facebook if you will give us a thumbs up and also share the video. I know not everybody does it. I don't know why. I can't explain why people don't do it. But if you're a member at North Hamilton, please do that. It's a way of helping the world get to our material. I don't know why we wouldn't do it, but if you would, please do that. Share the video on your timeline so that all your friends and family can also benefit from the video, but also give us a thumbs up. It's an easy way for us to count the number of interactions with our video without us having to go to the diagnostics tool and checking number of views, how long people watched it for, and all of that. Just a quick thumbs up gives us a really quick way to count the number of people who were involved in it. That would help us out a lot if you would do that. So we have been involved in a study of what happens when we die. That's the question. We're doing our best to provide a Bible answer for that. So we're midway through the series, and now we're to the point of looking at, last week we finished out our discussion of the resurrection of the dead, so we took a look at the resurrection. And this week we're going to be taking a look at what happens to the universe. Some confusion on that in the world, and we want to make sure that we are on the right side, that we understand the truth about the universe and what's going to happen to the world upon our exit from the grave. So I love singing, and I know you do too. I love, and I mean not just singing like radio songs. I love the songs we sing in our assemblies, the psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs that we sing. And we have a lot of songs that are not just titled, but themed toward the end of the world and what's going to happen. Songs like "This World Is Not My Home." I love that song. We sing "When We All Get to Heaven." Know that song? All right, so there's a reference, there's a message in that song. "When the roll is called up yonder." Now that's always been one of my favorites. When I was a kid, I would scream that song out loud. I just love that song. That's got a great message to it. When the roll is called up yonder. "Home of the soul." Okay, and that's not talking about the earth. Won't it be wonderful there? Right? So we've spent a lot of time in our singing, in the words we say, talking about leaving this earth. But we are still made to wonder what does happen to the earth when we leave to go there, or when the roll is called up yonder? What happens to the planet that we're on right now, to the universe that we live in currently? Does it exist forever? Will it be destroyed? I know you're probably thinking, well, yeah, I mean, it does, because we sing about it and we study about it, but as easy as that is for us to say yes, it's not that easy for everybody. There's a lot of confusion on that subject in the world. In fact, there are many people, there are even groups of people, entire groups of people who say that we're going to live on earth forever. One group has preached almost since its inception that we're going to be living on earth, paradise on earth, in a renovated earth, but paradise, sort of a utopian paradise. And you can see sometimes in their publications and the material that they might hand you when they come to your door, that they believe in a future utopian society right here on earth. And it's not just, it's not just them. A lot of people have been swayed by very prominent theologians these days. Tom Wright is one, N.T. Wright, who sort of preaches this paradise on earth philosophy, theory, that the real promise of God was a renewed earth. And a lot of folks have bought into that. A lot of people have bought into this idea of a future paradise on earth, sort of a refinished type of earth that we're going to live on, that heaven really is here on earth. So is our paradise on earth? Is our heaven here in this world, or is it somewhere else? And if we suggest that it is, what actually happens to the universe? I don't think it's a tough question. I just think we have to be honest enough to accept what the Bible teaches in that regard. But, one of the striking, or I would say not the striking, maybe a sticking point. It's where they get stuck, would be the phrase, the new heavens and the new earth. And I would say striking, like this is where they strike their point at. But I think it's probably better to say a sticking point, because I think it's something they need to move beyond, and maybe there's some confusion on that idea of the new heavens and the new earth. I think our starting point tonight needs to be that the Bible does draw a distinction between the earth and heaven. There's a difference between the two of those things, and so there's the earth, and then there's heaven, right? There's a difference between the two of those. Now I have my Bible open in Matthew chapter 5. If you'd like to follow along tonight, let's go to Matthew 5, because we are studying together. So Matthew chapter 5, and let's look down in verse 37-ish, 33 beginning, verse 33. So this is right in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is still making his contrasts. You've heard it's been said by those of old, and here's what I'm telling you. Verse 33. I'll give you a second to get there. You ready? Verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform your oaths to the Lord. So he's making a point about making promises. And he's going to condemn any promise that would be made in vain. You make a promise, you ought to intend to keep it. That's his point. But notice he's going to draw a contrast that's important for us tonight. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. So, in one passage he talks about heaven, in the other he talks about the earth. Heaven is one thing, the earth is another thing. Okay, so that's really important for us to understand. They're not the same. So if God makes a reference to heaven, he's not talking about the earth. If he talks about the earth, he's not talking about heaven. Matthew 6, verse 10. Your kingdom come, which it's here now. It's the kingdom is the church. It's here now. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So you have this reference again to the heavens, and then you got the earth. The heaven is one thing, the earth is another thing. Drop down to verse 19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust do corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. So you have heaven here, Well, I mean, it's not in the physical realm. It's just not like up, but we're drawing a contrast. You have heaven, you have earth. Heaven is one thing, earth is another thing. Okay, so that's really important for us to understand when we get to talking about what happens at the resurrection, the judgment, what's going to happen to the physical universe. Then if we go to Colossians chapter 1, and we get to verse 5, notice in verse 5 he says, because of the hope which is laid up for you in heaven. Your hope is in heaven, right? And he does the same thing in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3 and 4. You know, your inheritance is an incorruptible inheritance. It doesn't fade away. It's reserved in heaven for you. So heaven is one thing, the earth is another thing. So we have to admit that the Bible makes the distinction between the heavens and the earth, and we also understand that when we see this phrase, the new heavens and the new earth, it's in harmony with everything the Bible teaches. It's not incompatible with the idea of there being the heavens and the earth, right? So we just have to figure out what is meant by this new heavens and new earth. We got to figure out, you know, where that fits, what the context of it is, what the meaning of it is, so that we're not in contradiction with any other part of the Bible. The Bible doesn't contradict itself. If there's a contradiction, I've messed it up somewhere, or you've messed it up somewhere, but it's not the Bible that's at fault. We've misunderstood it along the way somewhere. So I want to take a look at this expression, the new heavens and the new earth. Let's see if we can make some sense of that, figure out what's going on, and then look at another passage where it's just exceedingly clear what is going to happen to the world, the physical universe, when the Lord comes back in judgment, which is part of the answer to the question, what happens when we die? So to do this, let's go to 2 Peter chapter 3. 2 Peter chapter 3. Now we'll be here primarily for the rest of tonight, so if you want to take a Bible ribbon marker or a pen or pencil and put it there, we might flip back and forth, but we will mostly be in 2 Peter chapter 3. So 2 Peter chapter 3. And here's the expression we're looking at. It's verse 13. He says, nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. And I guess because it has it has earth in it. That's because, that's why we say it's a sticking point. It's, people are moving along and then they get stuck here because they don't know where to go. It says earth, and how can that not be a renovated earth? All right, so let's take a look at it. We have some help in this passage when we're looking at this phrase, new heavens and a new earth. Stay in the same chapter. Let's go back. Now, at the beginning of the chapter, Peter's talking about scoffers in his day, and what they were essentially denying is the involvement of God in the affairs of men at any point. Peter said they just don't understand history. For example, consider the flood. That's God's hand in history, human history. God definitely worked then, and he's going to work in the future as well. Not that he's at work now in the present, but he's looking at catastrophic and dramatic interruptions by God in the affairs of humanity. Well, look at verse 7. But the heavens and the earth. Now, it's interesting, he talks about new heavens and a new earth. But he also talks about, in the same chapter, verse 7, the heavens and the earth which now exist. So there's a heavens and an earth now. And these are the ones that exist now. But in verse 13, you've got a contrast to a new heavens and a new earth. So verse 7, the heavens and the earth which exist now are kept in store by the same word. That'd be the power of God. And reserved for fire until the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. So he talks about the heavens and the earth that exists now. But notice he says they're kept in store, right? They're being reserved until the day that they're going to be reserved for fire, right? So he's going to talk about beginning in verse 10. They're being preserved until their destruction. But there is a heavens and an earth, but it exists now, and that's reserved for fire. Whatever the new heavens and the new earth is in verse 13 is a different heavens and an earth, right? Then he talks about it, verse 10, he talks about judgment, because we have that reference to the Lord's sudden coming like a thief in the night, verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with great noise, the elements will melt with fervent heat, Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Therefore, since all these things will be dissolved. What does that include? Well, it includes verse 7, the earth and the heavens that exist now, that are reserved for that. And he says, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for the coming of the day of God, in which the heavens will be dissolved and the elements will melt with fervent heat. So it's all going to be gone. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But so you have this reference after all of that to new heavens and a new earth. Now notice that in this passage, Peter does not say, right? He does not say a refurbished earth. He's talking about the heavens and the earth that exist now, and all that's going to be destroyed, melted, dissolved. That's his language. And then there's something new, previously non-existent, unheard of, novel, something entirely different than that. So one of the things that helped me is this is not the only time this is ever used in the Bible, this expression, the new heavens and the new earth. It's used quite a few times. We find it first in the Old Testament. Other writers use that term, but it's how they're using the term that helps us in the generic sense of understanding it. If we were to go back to the book of Isaiah, and that's why I say mark your spot in 2 Peter. We're coming back to 2 Peter chapter 3. Let's go to the book of Isaiah for just a minute. Isaiah chapter 65, so near the end of the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 65. So let's go to Isaiah 65. And would you drop down to verse 17? Verse 17. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former shall not be remembered or come to mind. He talks about rejoicing and being glad. Notice in verse 19, I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people. The voice of weeping shall be no more. No more crying. No more tears. That language is being used. So he has the same reference, chapter 66. Drop over to verse 22. Same thing. Verse 22, for as the new heavens and new earth which I will make shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your descendants and your name remain. So he's talking about, in the book of Isaiah, new heavens and a new earth in which there's no more crying and no more tears. And then if we were to go to the book of Revelation, right, the book of Revelation, and we were to go to chapter 21, I think this is exactly what the reference is in the book of Isaiah. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 1, I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. There was no more sea. Verse 4, God will wipe away all tears from their eyes. There's no more death, no more sorrow, no more crying. And if we go to verse 2, he's telling us what that is. The holy city, New Jerusalem, that it's not heaven because it's coming down out of heaven from God. Prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So whatever this is in chapter 21 is called, it's the mountain of God. It's the bride of Jesus Christ. It's spiritual Mount Zion. I think that's the church. And so if we look at what Isaiah said of new heavens and new earth and look at the way John applied it, what this phrase generally just is suggestive of is a change in the spiritual order of things. So whether it's used of the church or whether it's used of the end of time, it's talking about a change in the order of things from one form into another. And what we have to look at then is the context to determine how it's being applied. It doesn't always have the same meaning, even though the generic sense of it is a change from one form or one order into another. So how is it being used in whatever passage is being used? Again, I think Revelation chapter 21, I think, is a reference to the church with whatever remote application you could make to the end of the world. I mean, there's obviously some if it's true of the church, it's certainly more so true of heaven. No more tears, no more crying. That's language from Isaiah chapter 65 being used by John in chapter 21. So obviously, we have to take it in its context. So with that said, I want to just spend a few more minutes in 2 Peter chapter 3, because this is really important, because I'm convinced it is the truth of God. It is just plain as day, right, that the physical universe that we're living in now is going to be destroyed. It will not exist anymore. It's not going to be renovated. It won't exist. It's gone. So let's look at a couple of things. Now, I kind of hurriedly read through it just a moment ago. But let's look at verse 10 beginning. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away. That's some of the key language of this passage. It will pass away with great noise. The elements will melt. Notice, pass away, melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. Pass away, melted, burned up. Then in verse 11, therefore, since all these things will be dissolved. That's really important, that quartet of words there. Pass away, melt, dissolved, burned up. And then he says, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be dissolved, being on fire, the elements will melt with fervent heat. Almost a repeat of all those major words. So he talks about the heavens and the earth and the works of God. Well, that would be the entire universe. There's nothing that is exempted from whatever's under consideration. Everything is involved. All the works of God's hands in a physical sense, everything that he made is included in this language here. And then he says in verse 10 that the elements will melt with fervent heat. There's some interesting words here. First of all is the word elements. This is the word most lexicographers would identify as a word that means like the basics. It is a word that means the fundamental components of an object. This would be like the ABCs of the universe, the building blocks of the universe. One says, these words written by Peter long before the atomic age, but they fit strikingly into the atomic category. And so the language he's using here when he says, the elements, he's talking about the most minute particles of the universe. Things that you and I can't even see with the human eye, but are the building blocks, the fundamentals of everything physical in this world. And here's Peter saying in this passage, they're going to be dissolved, they're going to pass away, they're going to be burned up, they are going to melt away. One even goes so far as to say what we're talking about here is the primary matter in his work. But all of that, every bit of what he's talking about is going to be melted. And it's going to be, according to verse 10, burned up. Now, you have this language. I'm reading from New King James. It says burned up. But you have that, it appears in the King James, the New King James, American Standard has that, New American Standard has that. I know some translations that try to change this into, it will be discovered. That, I just don't think that's a good translation at all. And not because I have a preference or a bias. It's just not fitting of the context or the word itself. I know that there are a few later manuscripts that might use this term. They say discovered, but the meaning would be, in that sense, if it is used in that sense, would probably mean more like discovered it's been found out, it's been exposed, right? It doesn't mean like something's been missing all these years. This utopian type of world has now been found. It's like it's had this coating on it, it's been scratched off, and now we found it. If you even translate it as discovered, which I think could be misleading, I don't think that's a good translation at all, based on the context of how it's used. It would be used maybe in the sense of found for destruction, or discovered for destruction, or laid bare for sentence. That would be the only way it could be used. It doesn't mean something hidden has been discovered, and so therefore it's now usable, because the context doesn't bear out that meaning. In verse 11, he says all these things are going to be dissolved, and it literally means that term destroyed to the point of non-existence. In Danker's work, he says to reduce something by violence into its component parts and to destroy. So when it comes to the meaning of the terms, you can't take some twist on it and put it in there. It just means that the physical universe will be no more. Now, I'll tell you, for me, that helps me wade through some of the very popular opinions and get to the other side. One is that when the Lord comes back, he's going to set up a kingdom on the earth and reign for 1,000 years. That simply is not true. There will be no universe upon which he can reign. Not to mention, if you go back and read Jeremiah 22, and you read Matthew 1, and you read Hebrews 8:1 and some other passages, Hebrews 7:14 and some other things, Jesus cannot be a priest upon the earth. And he's a priest king, which means it's not just a king at once and then later on a priest. He's priest and king at the same time, according to Zechariah 6:12 and 13. But there will not be, from a practical standpoint, there won't be an earth upon which he could reign. Nobody's staying here. It's not just 144,000 are going to heaven, but the rest of everybody stays upon the earth. Everybody that's going to heaven goes to heaven. Everybody that's going to hell goes to hell, but there won't be any more physical universe. Nobody is staying within the physical universe. The physical universe will be dissolved. So what happens when we die? Well, the next step is there's resurrection from the dead. We talked about that the previous 2 weeks, and at that, it's all momentary, right? In a twinkling of an eye, as fast as you could blink, it's all happening. The physical universe is going to be destroyed. Okay, now I don't say that to be combative. It's the truth. Verses 10 through 12 talk about the destruction of the physical universe. And I could even go to Revelation 20 and read about, in Revelation 20, beginning in verse 11, how the universe is going to be folded back like a scroll, and it's not found anymore. Where you have the scene of judgment and figurative description, but even the language is, there's no place found for them in Revelation 20, verse 11. No more place found for the physical heavens and the physical earth. It's just going to be gone. It will not exist anymore. And I'm thankful for that. Aren't you? That the promise of eternal life is not, here's the earth, enjoy it. I'm thankful I get to go be where God is, in heaven. And even people who are lost will not be on the earth. That's not their sentence. Their sentence is an eternal punishment, which we'll talk about coming up. So the physical universe will not exist anymore. I hope that clarifies some things. I hate that there's even confusion on that in the world. I know sometimes people can be convincing and confusing in their language, and maybe they could sway people, even if they seem sincere. And I'm sure they are, but they're just sincerely wrong about it. It's possible for people to believe lies. Even me, I could believe a lie and be convinced of that, according to 2 Thessalonians 2, 11 to 12. So I have to make sure that what I believe harmonizes with this. And I don't get to just abuse a passage or take it out of context and twist it to my own liking because I want it that way. I have to put everything in its proper place. And the Bible teaches that what happens when we die? There's judgment, there's resurrection, and there's the destruction of the physical universe. Hey, I'll see you next week. Tune back in. Be sure to click the like button. Also subscribe. And until I see you next week, please know I love you very much and take care.